A Tale of the Holy Cross of Jesus Christ by R.D. Cruz. Part 3 of 8. Eventually, Simon of Cyrene had become a follower of Jesus. He believed the innocence of Jesus. He diligently gathered the Holy Cross, the nails, the crown of thorns, the spear, and also the shroud. With the help of Matthew and John, he placed them in an empty tomb. But before they rolled the heavy stone, John said, "I will give the shroud to his mother as a remembrance." The trio painstakingly secured the stone into its place. They were hoping that the future generations of believers would recover these holy artifacts. Narcissus, meanwhile, was still actively involved in surveillance duties. Another meeting was occurring in the Mount of Olives. Upon arriving, Narcissus, wearing a disguise, saw a small crowd gathering before a man in white who was preaching. Narcissus was hiding about 100 yards away from a rock, and he could attest that this man was Jesus. He was really alive. He has risen from the dead. He showed his nail marks in his hands and his feet. Jesus dropped his shawl to expose the wound in his right side. Narcissus could not believe his eyes. He had to rub them a couple of times and wash his face from his canteen to be sure. When he looked back, Jesus was gone. The crowd kept looking up in the sky. Narcissus felt nauseous. So this man whom he crucified must have returned to heaven, that is Mount Olympus. He was truly the son of the father Zeus. At that time, Mary Magdalene came over and recognized Narcissus, but he was totally dumbfounded. "I know you," she said, "and you saw everything." Narcissus scurried away without saying a word. Meanwhile, the Jesus followers were becoming even more active. It was barely 50 days after this incident when they met again in a secluded house in Jerusalem. Narcissus had resumed spying on them. A loud sound like thunder erupted inside. Then they burst out of the house and began to evangelize in different languages. Jerusalem was a metropolitan city with traders from the east. It was a phenomenon since every foreigner thought each disciple spoke their native tongue. The disciple had so much conviction and energy. Christ has died, but Christ has risen. Christ has ascended into heaven. God the Holy Spirit has descended upon us to give us the strength to spread the good news. Even the man who denied Christ was the most outspoken. He spoke in fluent Latin like Julius Caesar in his Gallic wars. But the foreigner next to me from China heard him speak in Mandarin. The trader from India spoke in Punjabi. Then finally Mary, the Jesus mother, emerged from the room. She saw Narcissus. She approached him and squeezed his hand. No words were said. She had the eyes of forgiveness. Narcissus was scared to death, for he has done what he has done to her son. She walked away humbly with Mary of Magdala. The Jews had been harassing the Jesus followers, now called Christians. A man called Paul from the city of Tarsus was the chief crusader for the Jews. It was getting out of control. They pulled the Christians from their houses and manhandled them with clubs and rocks. Some of them were even crucified. Their women and daughters were dragged into the street and molested. Narcissus had to act fast. With his troop of 100 soldiers, he confronted the army of Paul. Narcissus said to Paul, "If you do not cease this, I will not only arrest you, but execute you on the spot." Paul, being a Roman citizen, boldly answered, "You have no right to arrest me or punish me without a trial." Narcissus rebutted, "Just go ahead and try me, and you will join this Jesus Christ instantly in the afterlife." Paul backed down by that threat. The Jews dropped their clubs to the ground. Meanwhile, Pilate's wife Claudia had a dream about the plight of Jesus' mother, Mary. The Jews wanted to kill her for being the mother of Jesus. Mary, with the help of the Christians, hid from house to house. It was not safe to stay permanently in one place every night. The anti-Christians vandalized their house and stoned them. But Mary, with the help of these Christians, hid her in one underground cellar, which was camouflaged by the wooden floor. Mary of Magdala kept her company all the time. The house occupants provided her with food, water, and other necessities at nightfall. They kept silent during daytime by sleeping soundly and waking up after dusk when the town has turned silent. They lived like rats underneath. But Mother Mary remained defiant for the sake of her son. So Claudia ordered Narcissus to save Mary with the help of Malchus. Narcissus was tracked down with Mary and the young man John. Narcissus made all the arrangements so they could escape to Ephesus, since Narcissus' friend Theodosius, the tribune, was assigned there, was also a Christian sympathizer. For sure, Theodosius would make all the preparations to build a secluded house for the Blessed Mother. Claudia gave them a bag with 30 pieces of silver as pocket money. She also wrote a sealed letter to Theodosius, which read, Tribune Theodosius, please make all the arrangements for Mary, the mother of Jesus, and her company by building a secluded house for them. Make sure they are safe from harm. The Jews had been persecuting them. Also, ensure that they have daily provisions. Perhaps John or Mary of Magdala could be the courier for these necessities. I will provide sustenance every now and then. Thank you, and I trust you that you will not disappoint me. With the blessing of our Father Zeus and Mother Vesta. This is Claudia Procula Pilatus, wife of Governor Pontius Pilate, granddaughter of the Emperor Augustus Caesar. To say goodbye to Mother Mary, Narcissus kissed the hem of her dress. The party of the Blessed Mother, Mary of Magdala and John, was escorted by 2 soldiers. Narcissus told all the garrison staff they were going to Damascus to foil any interceptions. There were spies for the Jews all over. So when Paul tried to follow their trail, he thought they were on their way to Damascus. An unexplained lightning in bright light during that day dethroned Paul from his horse and blinded him. Claudia had another dream, but now about the veil of Christ. It was known in the Roman world that Emperor Tiberius was dying. So Claudia summoned Narcissus again to locate this Veronica, who had wiped Jesus' face during the Passion, which had possessed that miraculous holy veil. This would cure the emperor's ailment. So Narcissus, again with the help of Malchus, set out to find this Veronica. They arrived at the nick of time. Anti-Jewish factions were stoning Veronica's house and followers. Yet the Christians, those with ailments, those with sick children of relatives, those who had just wished the blessing of the veil, all lined up outside the house. Narcissus signaled his soldiers to confront the Jewish crowd. The Romans drew their swords, and the Jews remained silent. Narcissus entered the house and begged Veronica to come visit the Roman emperor to cure him. But Veronica resisted. However, Matteo opened his mouth. Even the Romans need the mercy of the Lord Jesus Christ. This convinced Veronica to change her mind, and eventually, since Matteo would accompany her also, including Pilate's wife Claudia, to meet the Emperor Tiberius. Jesus had a sign of relief. The mission has been accomplished. The emperor did not live in Rome. His consuls ran the empire in Rome. He lived peacefully in the island of Capri, in the mountain retreat of Villa Jovis. Veronica, Matteo, Narcissus, and Claudia were received royally in Capri after a long sea journey, since Claudia, of noble birth, was the granddaughter of the late Emperor Augustus. It took almost a 2-hour house and buggy ride to the top. The villa was spectacular, like a fairy tale castle. It was marble white on a rocky cliff. It stood like an eagle perched on top of a mountain. But Tiberius, the emperor, was very near death. Although his room was made of marble and gold, the scent of incense and medications were pungent everywhere. Physicians from all over the empire were present, attending the dying emperor. Veronica asked everyone to leave the room. Narcissus waited nervously outside the whole night. He thought to himself about Pilate's decree to him. If the emperor does not heal, it will be your neck. Swish! Hours passed and Narcissus had a sleepless night. Veronica simply placed the veil in the emperor's chest and had started to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. The very next day, the emperor was eating fruit for breakfast and ready to tackle any imperial issue. The veil worked its miracle. He was dressed in white tunic and with a purple shawl, the color exclusive only for the emperor. Everyone could hear Matteo's narration to the emperor. Your Excellency, Jesus' family is from Nazareth in Galilee. However, with our Lady Claudia here, her grandfather, the divine Augustus Caesar, declared an edict for a national census. So the Holy Family had to travel back to their hometown of Bethlehem because they belonged to the house of King David. So this Jesus was born in Bethlehem, thus fulfilling the old prophecy of a great king of Israel would originate from that humble town. O Bethlehem Ephratah, of all the towns in Israel, a ruler shall come from thee, whose ancestry is from the golden age. In other words, Your Excellency, the divine Augustus Caesar himself carried out this prophecy. Emperor Tiberius snickered. Then Emperor Tiberius recalled Narcissus' father Horatio, who served under him during his military campaigns in Germania. He was surrounded by faithful senators and generals. The emperor was even more inquisitive about this bill, so he cross-examined the nervous Narcissus. Why was this Jesus Christ crucified? I believe you are the one who crucified him. Sir, he had been found guilty by the governor Pontius Pilate. Guilty of what? Sir, he proclaimed himself as the Son of God, and according to Jewish law, this was blasphemy, thus punishable by death. Our gods, Zeus, Apollo, and Neptune, have the power to take human form. This would not be a crime by Roman law. By the way, was he really a god? Frankly, sir, after his death on the cross, which I personally authenticated, I sealed his tomb. 3 days later, I broke the seal and opened the tomb. His body disappeared completely. Matteo here could attest to that phenomenon. Days later on, I witnessed him, alive from a short distance. He showed his nail marks and the wound on his chest, where the lance pierced his heart. A few minutes afterwards, he vanished and he must have ascended into Mount Olympus. Veronica and Matteo were astonished to hear Narcissus' testimony regarding the ascension of Jesus into heaven. Still, there is no crime committed, the emperor insisted, shaking his head. Sir, he proclaimed himself as the king of the Jews. Tell me, young man, if he were a king, how big was his army? How many horses did he have? How many swords did they possess? Sir, his followers were very peaceful. They had no swords or weapons. They only followed him on foot to preach and even perform miracles, healing the sick and feeding the poor. The emperor was becoming irritable, so he exploded. Why the hell did Pilate execute this innocent man? Sir, this is what the people wanted, Narcissus replied stutteringly. Pilate was turning as red as a beet with anger. One of the soldiers, named General Vespasian, interrupted. Your Excellency, he is just a soldier carrying out his orders. Pilate played it safe because he did not want to antagonize the crowd. It was better to execute an innocent man than to stir a revolt among the crowd. By the way, Your Excellency, it was not you appointed Pilate to the post, but your consul Sejanus in Rome. Of course, they were drinking buddies. And they all laughed. Even the emperor had a good laugh. A sumptuous feast ensued. Narcissus had a chance to be familiar with General Vespasian, who would later lead a legion sooner or later. End of part 3 of 8.